Okay, that's it. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas in the Ois V'Hadar edition, Daf Yud Gimel, otherwise known as Perek Aleph, in the Sugya of Halacha Hey. We are in our edition 2 lines from the top of the Amid, and we are in the middle of learning how we have in the Shema an allusion, right, a remez to all of the Aseres HaDibros. We already went through 4 of the 10, and God willing, we're going to continue to learn regarding the other 6. It goes without saying that really the Pnimius, the Aseres HaDibros, really even the Asara Mamoros linked to the Aseres HaDibros is connected to the 10 Sfiras. And that will give a whole deeper appreciation to really how we have all of the 10 Sfiras alluded to in the Shema. But let's leave a few comments, if we have time, after we go through the Sugya, because we have a couple of very important topics that we have to cover today. We have in Masechtas Talmud a Mishnah that was also discussed in Bavli Brachas. The Mishnah speaks about that which happened vis-a-vis davening in the Beis HaMikdash. Of course, the main avoid in the Beis HaMikdash is Karbanos, but after the Talmud was geshachted, was slaughtered, and after the limbs were placed on the ramp, if you remember, it didn't go all the way up into the fire right away. It was placed on the ramp, generally in the lower part of the ramp. Then the Kohanim would go into the Lishkas HaGazis, and we're going to actually quote verbatim, as some have the Girsa, even in the Yerushalmi, that Mishnah in Talmud, that Amar Lohem HaMemuna, that Baruchu Bracha Achas, and we had a discussion in Bavli exactly what bracha is that referring to. And as we'll see over here, that we're going to learn the way the Yerushalmi understands the Shita of Reish Lakish, that they would say Ahavas Olam. They would not make both brachas prior to Shema as we do. They would omit the Yoitzer HaMa'oros, as the Gemara in Yerushalmi will explain why. They would say Ahavas Olam. In the Beis HaMikdash, they would actually say the Aseres HaDibros, and then they would say the Shema. And we discussed this in Bavli, how really there was a Havamina that everyone should do it that way. There's a reason why the Bavli gives, why we don't do it. We're going to learn different approaches here in the Yerushalmi, but all of that is linked to the Nekuda that the Shema has in it an allusion to the Aseres HaDibros, and that's going to lead us into the topic that really the brach of Avas Olam, that other people call Avarabba, as we'll explain in a moment. We'll just repeat what the Alter Rebbe explains. Again, these 2 nuschais, we say Avas Olam, other people say Avarabba. We'll get to that. That's very meaningful. Everything is very meaningful, but the Alter Rebbe explains it to us, is that in Avas Olam, you have a certain type of Birchas HaTorah. Right, etc., to the point that if someone did not say Birchas HaTorah, and yes, they said Avas Olam, it could exempt one from the obligation of Birchas HaTorah. It could, as we'll see, when yeah and when not. And finally, at least we'll begin the topic. We'll begin the topic today of what parts of learning Torah demand the Birchas HaTorah. People hear that question, they say, what are you talking about? Any part of Torah. That's the way we paskin. But if we're going to go back at least to what we began just a few daf ago, when we spoke about the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and Torah Semonasai, and the Torah Shebachsav, and the Torah Shebal Peh, and Torah Shebal Peh, the Yerushalmi says is a higher level than Torah Shebachsav. Like, wow. Okay, so we will learn a machloikas, here at least the 2-way machloikas, what part of Torah demands a Birchas HaTorah, and if we'll have time again, we'll just explain a little bit as to why is it that nowadays we make 3 brachas before we learn Torah. Truth be told, some people understand that the bracha of the Harevna Nachmetavav makes the first 2 into 1. But let's understand it that we make 3 brachas. Any other bracha before you do a mitzvah, you make 1 bracha. I'm not talking about Birchas Hamazon after. This is a bracha prior to a mitzvah. And really, you could be Yoitza, as we'll see today in Avos Olam. Why do we make 3 brachas? And why is it that when you get called to the Torah, even if you made the 3 brachas, you still have to make the Asher Bachar Mon? So let's see how much of that we can cover. Baal Peh, But these are loaded topics. So again, we left off 2 lines from the top of the Amid. We went through the first 4 dibras, and we are up to now the 5th dibra, and that is the last one of the right side, which is Kabed Esavicha ve'esibecha. Okay, so where do we have that in the Shema? Listen to the logic over here. Zakti Gemara. I'll tell you where. We say, Laman Yid B'Yamechem V'Mei V'Nechem. Look inside the top of name Moshe. Man Yarichun Yamecha. V'Zel Nirmaz B'Pasik Laman Yid B'Yamechem. Because when we are speaking about us having a long life, what are we referring to? We are referring to something that is within our power. Now, within our power, yeah, I know you can eat healthy and you can do exercise. All that will do is that the life that God gave you will be healthier. To prolong life, for that we need God's blessings. God determines how long we live. And the fact that Hashem linked long life to kibbud av v'ein, that's the link. That how is it that you'll have a Laman Yid B'Yamechem? If you'll be Makayim, says the Pnei Moshe, this mitzvah of Kabed Esavicha, then you'll have a long life. And then when we say in the Shema, we don't just say Laman Yid B'Yamechem. We also add the words V'mei V'nechem. How is that going to be? If we will educate our children for them to be Mechabed av v'ein, how do we educate them? By us honoring our parents. So then they will also have a long life. Okay, let's go back in the Gemara. The 6th commandment, now it's going to get a little bit more of a stretch. The 6th commandment is right at the top of the left side, Lo Tirtzach. So where do you have that alluded to in the Aseret Adibris? The Gemara says, I'll tell you where. Because it says in the Shema, Va'avadata Meheram. Now, really it says, Va'avadata Meheram, Al Ha'aretz HaTeva Asher Hashem Lo Yisem Lachem. The pshat, if you read the Shema, is that if we don't keep the mitzvahs, we will be exiled from the land of Israel. That's the pshat. That's how everyone understands it, right? We'll be lost from the land. But really, the kasha would be that if the Oibishter is only referring to Golis, it should have says Ugelisem Maher. Va'avadetem means, God forbid, mamish, lost, death. So hold on. How is death in alluding to Lo Tirtzach? I'll tell you why. Because if a person is going to murder, then they're going to get killed. What you put out there happens to you. Truth be told, there are many mitzvahs in the Torah for which one, the Torah says, if one violates that rule of God, they're going to lose their life. But there's nothing more than the midah keneged midah in a very simple, logical way than murder. You took a life, not you, someone, God forbid, took a life, so then their life is going to be taken. So that's the allusion to Va'avadat HaMeher. Okay, the next commandment, right? The second one in the left column is Leitinov, not to commit adultery. Where is that alluded to? And let's just remind ourselves that when we began this sugya on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, we quoted the girsa of the Gra. So the Gemara either inside this sugya began when the Gemara asked the Pnei Makoiden Shtei Parshiyas Halom. That doesn't fit with this answer of Rabbi Levi. All right, that only the state. If the kasha was only regarding why do we read every day the 2 parshiyos, that would fit with Rab Simon's answer because it says in 2 parshiyos shchiva v'kima. It says that in the first, says it in the second. You don't have any mention of lying down and waking up in the third. So actually, we quoted the gears of the Gra. The Gemara is asking me, why do we say all of the parshas? That's why we're quoting many psukim from Vayomer. It doesn't matter that we're quoting from Vayomer because the kasha, according to this version, was why do we say all of them? Why do we say in the third portion? And on that, Omer Rabbi Levi, that you should know, we should know, and we know that liba ve'ena, that the person's heart and the person's eyes are today in sarsurei decheta. They are the 2 intermediaries of sin. That's what happens. In other words, ayin roya v'leiv chaymet. That's the way God made us. And on that, God Almighty is telling us to know, bini, my son, we the Jewish people, give libcha li, give your heart to me. Ve'einecha, and let your eyes guard my ways. In other words, that if you will give to me your heart and your eyes, then I'll know, and then I'll know that you are mine. Gewaldig. In other words, the guarding of the eyes is specifically in reference not to look at sexual promiscuity. Then next commandment fits Now, loy signoif. Now, just to remember that when we learned Chumash Rashi, right? Pshat loy signoif and aseres adibris is not to kidnap and sell people. But I want you to know that in the Yerushalmi, this Gemara that will remember this. Loy signoif means pashat not to steal, not the way we learned in the Pshat. Why? Because where's the allusion? It says, you will gather your grain. Oh, your grain. Clearly, we understand it here not as referring to kidnapping. When it says in the next command, right? Do not bear false witness against your fellow. Where do we have that alluded to? At the end of the third parsha, where we don't only say the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem, which are the words that we have in Parshas Ekev, we actually add the word emes. Why is that? Because we're going to quote a pasuk from Yirmiyahu, where it says V'Hashem Elokim emes, and it says later in that pasuk, Hu Elokim Chayim u'Melech Gavaldik. In other words, emes, speak to emes. If you're not speaking to emes, there's a certain level of denying of the truth of God. And indeed, Ma'u emes, Shuhu Elikim Chayim u'Melech Olam. And as the Pnei Moshe says, the Gavaldik and Noi Tirikain, that emes, Aleph stands for the word Elokim, Mem is for Melech, and the Taf is for Tamid. That Elokim, Melech, Tamid. And actually, you want to speak about Chassidus. At least let's touch over here. How do you define truth? These are questions that when you hear the answer without struggling to get the answer on your own for 100 years, you don't appreciate the gold that the Torah gives us. That's a big question. And we should appreciate the answer. And Chassidus says, emes is that which does not change. That's the ultimate definition of emes. And the raya that the Chassidus brings us from the Mishnah regarding Mayim Hamachazvin, regarding, you have to go to a Mayim Chaim. What's a Mayim Chaim? You have to go into a natural spring. And if the spring even only dries up once in 7 years, it's called false waters, even when there is waters, because it's not always going to be there. And that's the definition of emes. And when a person is bearing false testimony, before that, they're shouting Shema Yisrael. Later at night, they're going to shout Shema Yisrael. At that moment, they're going away from the emes. And going away from the emes, even one moment, that's that commandment. The biggest kanas is that we live in Sheker. That's the kanas. Omar Rab Levi, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that im heyadato lechavercha edu sheker, mala niyolecha, ki ilu heyadato olai, shalei barasi shmayim ba'aretz. Let me add another nuance. That the whole part of the Baal Shem Tov, which it's a medrash, but the Baal Shem Tov celebrated, is that the creation is happening constant, tamid. In other words, being shekerdik, one moment is a denial of the creation. Why? Because creation happens every moment. Every moment there is God's involvement in making be what is. And one is denying that. Even for that one moment, he's denying in the emes. Okay, the final commandment is loisachmat beis riyach, don't covet, and alpi nigla, don't covet. Alpi nigla means don't desire in a way that you end up doing something that's wrong. Right? Stealing is lamashal, taking something and not paying for it. When a person covets, then they will coerce their fellow to sell their home. That's also prohibited. They paid, it's an action that came from the coveting that which is not yours. Where do we have that alluded to? Because it says, again, the word beisecha, and as the Pnei Moshe writes, more or less the middle of the Amid, 20 lines from the top, the word beisecha is only beisecha, but leisach and the seres hadibris isn't only beisecha. It's the beisecha and everything else. She'im choymed lebayis chaveiroi. That's how it begins. You catch yourself. A person is going to desire his fellow's wife. Not me, God forbid. You desire his house. You allow yourself that. Once you allow that in, so shiach madishtoi and v'chol asher loi. Because the pshat Vlad of no, very good. That the whole premise of Tanya is that unless one is a tzaddik, Hashem made us in a way that we are certainly not in full control of our emotions. So when a person looks at something, or they are attracted to something, or they desire something, it's not even in the realm of me having to koyach to stop, not to feel that. So if something is beyond my ability of choice, there cannot be a commandment there. A commandment generally is on machshava dibur u'maisa. So the way we, even al pinigla, loisachman means if a person looks and they desire, that first desire, that's not violating the 10 commandments. But if they keep on thinking about it, ooh, I want it, and that thought will end up thinking, oh, how can I get it? In other words, it's a loisachman that leads a person to a negative behavior. What would that be? Can be he's going to take it, because if the loisachman is techapid, then it's a repetition of loisignoi. Again, loisignoi, according to the Yerushalmi, is about even finance. It's not just about a human being. So it must be to buy it. That's how it gets there. Loisachman means people they do it now. They look at your house, they want to buy your house, and they offer you a lot of money. That's the loisachman. The first feeling of desire, and what I'm saying clearly about the Rebbe says it. In everything, in any thought that's sinful that comes into your head is not sinful. That's the way God made you. No. The thought is to give continuity to the thought. The thought is machshava. The machshava means to keep on thinking about it, to give continuity to that thought. Something coming into the mind, that is God's doing.
House building on a house is lot of house participating in bidding on a house.
No, bidding on the house, the guy wants to sell it.
Oh, gotcha.
That's something else. Talking about people that they desire what belongs to someone else and they conspire how to get it. And that's a terrible thing. And that goes to everything. They plan, what can I do to my fellow to get him to sell his house, to get him to divorce his wife, to get him to that, for me to get what's his. That's the lisach. Okay. Now, as we mentioned in the intro, and I really want to quote, because in Bavli, in Brachas, Daf Yud Aleph, and according to the Charedim, if you look inside the Charedim, the Gemara here also quotes the whole Mishnah. We're going to quote a Mishnah in Masechtas Talmud. Let's say it's written, and then, like the Gemara does when it comes to a local Mishnah, we're going to quote one part, we'll explain it. We'll quote another part, we'll weiter explain it. The reason why we were quoting this Mishnah from Talmud is because not only is there an allusion to the Aseres HaDibros and Shema, but really, as we'll see in the Beis HaMikdash, the Kohanim would make one of the brachas of Shema, according to our Gemara here, Avas Oilam. Then they would say the Aseres HaDibros, and then they would say the Shema. That's the Hemshah. But I want to read the Mishnah. So the Mishnah it writes like this: that Amar Lahem Hamamuna, like we mentioned in the intro, we did a pious, we made a lottery, and I think for the morning Talmud, I think there were 13 winners, if I'm not mistaken. And then you had all these Kohanim that brought the meat up on the ram. They placed it down on the ram, and that whole group and the other Kohanim involved, they went into the Lishkas HaGozes. When they are in the Lishkas HaGozes, they would do what they did for davening, which is a much shorter version of our davening, including the Shemona Esrei, but it wasn't only Shemona Esrei. And how did it begin? Says the Mishnah that the Memuna would tell them, Baruch Hu Bracha Achas. Now, what's that Bracha Achas? That's the first thing the Gemara is going to address over here. And it says, Veheim Baruch Hu, Be'er Hu. And then, V'karu Aseres HaDvarim, I'm reading the words of the Mishnah in Talmud. Shema, V'hoyim Shemaya, Vayomer. And then they made 3 brachas. What's amazing is that these three brachas, the first is Emes V'Yatzev Gal Yisrael. The second bracha is Avoida. Can you imagine? In other words, they would have in Shemona Esrei. We're putting it, the 3 brachas is like the bracha, what we is before the Shemona Esrei, straight into Avoida and Birchas Kohanim. Then the Mishnah concludes that on Shabbos, they would add a fourth bracha, benching the mishmar that's leaving. Now we're going to break down that Mishnah, even if you don't have this inside, and we're going to explain every line. So Tamon Taninan over there in Talmud we learned Pedekei that it's not clear what bracha is he referring to. That are words that are said in the Mishnah prior to the Mishnah continuing that they said that Adibris and Shema V'Him Shema V'Yom. So Ma Berchu, so Rav Masna Amar in the name of Shmuel, that refers to Birchas HaTorah. Now you're going to learn this, right? And you're going to think, Birchas HaTorah means, I don't know, Al Divrei Torah, Lasik B'Divrei Torah. No. Zu Birchas HaTorah means, as the Gemara will explain, Avas Oilam. In other words, they dafke did not make, what are we learning? We're learning a hemshech over here in our sugya about the blessings that you make before the Shema. We make 2 brachas at day, in the morning. And the way Hasidus explains it, why do we make 2 brachas? Because we have a mitzvah to love God. How are we going to love God? First, we have to contemplate how the source of our animal soul, which are the malachim, how they are in love with God. That arouses the grandkid, our animal, also to perhaps taste of Bissel of Avos Hashem. And then we speak about the love that God has to us, which is expressed by God giving us a Torah, Avas Olam Aftanu, etc. They did not say the first bracha of the Yotzei HaMa'oros. Maybe Al Pi Pnimius, you're kidding? They saw a heavenly fire consuming the karbonis. They saw the source of the animal. It came in the shape of a lion. That's what I'm saying. But here, first of all, bracha achas just here. Shmuel is not saying that's the way we're teaching. Birchas HaTorah doesn't mean what you think. It means avas oilam. Now I want to speak out right now. I know it's getting late, but we have time. And that's like this. The Alter Rebbe says like this: there is avas oilam avarab. We have a mitzvah, and God gives us a reward. We have the capacity to be misboinen, to contemplate, and to arouse a love to God. That contemplation has to come milmata l'maylo, beginning with the godliness that's in the world. Look at the world, look at your life. Look how great it is, look how beautiful, look at the sunrise. You start to love God. That's avas oilam. When we are zoicha, God gifts us a whole different experience of love. It's a love that's beyond limit, and that's called avarabo. The reason why we and many others dafka say avos olam is because we are davening. We are. The whole tefillah is what's on me. What's on me? Shemona Esrei is I'm asking of God to give me. But as I'm getting up to the Shemona Esrei, what's in my koyach is to reach the level of avos olam. But let's go back. That's what we're going to learn in a moment. We said this in the intro. And now we're quoting from the Mishnah and Talmud. Then they read Aseres Hadvarim, which, and then Shema, says the Gemara, Rabbi Ami b'Shem Resh Lakish, Zoy Meres. They went from Birchas HaTorah. That's the word. Birchas HaTorah doesn't mean Birchas HaTorah. It means Avos Olam. When we say Aboicher, Ba'ama Yisrael Ba'ahava, our meaning is we don't even say it loud, not to be mafsik, not even to say Amen. We don't even answer Amen. Here, I know, but here they're going from Birchas HaTorah, which is Avas Olam, Haboicher, and they're not going into the Shema. Because if there would be an issue of us not being able to interrupt between the Birchas HaTorah and the Shema, then they would not be allowed to add the Aseres Hadibros. On that, now we see the link. Gemara says that doesn't prove anything. You're not allowed to be mafsik. You're not allowed to make an interruption. Don't tell me that Aseres Hadibros is an interruption to the Shema. What are we learning right? We just learned right now that the Shema Yisrael has in it Aseres Hadvarim. It's part of the Shema. It's so part of the Shema that it's not called an interruption. That's the rebuttal. Amar Rebbe Ba, we would call him Reb Abba. Again, this is the aleph that many times is omitted. Ein min hada, nah, nishkaraya. You don't have a proof. Leis shama mina klum, rubs it in. You can infer nothing. Why? Because Aseres Hadibros hein gufa shel Shema. Wow. The Rav Masna, Rav Shmuel ben Nachman, the Tarvayu Namrin, that really, not only in the Beis Hamikdash, Bedin, Hava Sheyu, it should have been that we should have been Koiden Aseres HaDibros B'chol Yom, as the Kohanim did in the Beis Hamikdash, because Shema is really the Toichin is Aseres HaDibros. Now, Mepnei Ma'in Koiden Oison, Mepnei Tainas Haminim. What would be the Tainas Haminim? That they would argue wrongfully, that God gave something. God, you can't deny Sinai. Something happened. All God gave was the Aseres HaDibros. And if we would make too much of a big hoo-ha about it, they would say that. I want you to know that in halacha there's a conversation whether one is allowed to stand when they're reading, when they read the Aseres HaDibros in shul, when someone normally doesn't stand. Our minhag is to stand. We stand. But the reason why you have shitas in halacha is all from this source. So it's either stand for everything or stand for nothing. Because when you start giving chashivus to one more than the other, then the minim can go and say, that's taka holier, and it's not. It's all part of Torah Shabbat. Let's go weiter. Shmuel ben Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yehuda bar Zevida also says, now that you're telling me about what else should have said together, really we should have read Parsha. Can you imagine how long davening would be, guys? Wouldn't take the 15 minutes. We would have to add another whole 2 minutes because Aseres HaDibros and the whole Parshas Bal Kubila. What? You have to just also appreciate. No, what Aseres HaDibros for that we don't say Tircha de Tzibura, but to say the whole Parshas Balak. Now, why? Why would we say it? So Rab Chuna, why? We don't say it. The Gemara is going to give 3 reasons why we should have said it. One reason number 1, Rab Chuna Amar b'bnei Dechsiv ba Shchiva v'Kima. What do you have Shchiva v'Kima? I'm reading inside the Pnei Moshe, the first line under the Gemara. And that's similar, says the Pnei Moshe, the Shach b'chov kumecha. That watch HaKadosh Baruch Hu shoymireinu b'shachveinu v'kumeinu. That we should lishkoiv shalvim ushketim kari v'cholavi. Ulafika choy b'din. I'm reading the Pnei Moshe. Shiu koden gam ken parsha zu ila b'shum toirech tzibur. Answer number 2. Answer of why we should have said it. Rabbi Yossi Bey Rabbi Bun Amar b'pnei sheksiv b'hem yitzio malchus. Says the Pnei Moshe. What are you talking about? It says Yitzias Mitzrayim. Where do we have that in the parsha of Balak Ubilam? Keil Moitziam Mitzrayim. Where do we have Malchus? Utruas Melach Boy. And turning to that Yud Gimel Amid Beis and the Ois V'Hadras edition, Amar Rabbi Elazar. I'll tell you why. And this I see is the one that has the greatest link. The Pnei Sheksuva Batoira Banavim Baksuvim. Look inside the Pnei Moshe on the top. In other words, that not only is this written in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, but you have in Nevi'im. Where do you have in Nevi'im? Second line on top of Pnei Moshe. Amis Chordna Mayotz Balak Melech Moiv Umana Oisa Uma Ona Oisa Bilam Embaoid. And where do we have in the Ksumim Ben Nehemiah? It says Vayemahu Nikra B'Sefer Moshe Ashalo Yove Amoyne Mayavi Kiloi Kidmu Vayiskoid Olav Es Bilam L'Kol Leviavach Lekenos Haklol Lebracha. So let me go menakotza lakotza. Why don't we say that Aseres HaDibros? Because the meaning would say only the Aseres HaDibros was given from God. How do we rectify that? Maybe the rectification would be by not only being machshiv the Torah, by being machshiv the entirety of the Tanakh. What would be big? One topic: how God protects us from our biggest enemies. You know, when we say in the real Halal, the Halal Hagadol, which is Tehillim Kapitel Kuf Lamed Vav, that Lo'oisa Neflois Gedoylos Levade, says the Holy Baal Shem Tov, Lo'oisa Neflois. God does wonders, but Gedoylos Levade, the greatest wonders, we don't even know what God did for us. And you have to understand that unlike any other part of the Chumash, how do we know the whole parsha of Balak? How do we know that? Mainly at the beginning, God Adam knew, God told Adam what happened. Okay, that's one thing. Moshe Rabbeinu was told the Torah until Yisra and he wrote it down. We did not have spies embedded over there by the Moabites. No Jew was there present. With everything that was recorded is another chesed that God does all these miracles we still know about. The greatest chesed is at time God is megala what He did for us. That look at what happened. We never would have known. And that's written in Torah and Nevi'im and Ksuvim, and all of that is the word of God.
But in actuality, how do we know that from Moshe?
Moshe Rabbeinu was a Navi. In other words, you have like this. The Rebbe says you have Torah, mitzvahs, and nevuah. Each one has another koyach. That's also why the Rambam at the end writes that Mashiach is discussed, and the Rambam brings three sources. One of them is Dafka from Bilam, because Mashiach is connected to Torah, but connected to nevuah and connected to the mitzvah. Nevuah is Bilam. It's a parsha of nevuah. Like you think about it, we never would have known it. We don't know that. We only know that the whole Torah is greater than nevuah. But there's something in Nevuah unique. Okay, let's go right. Now that we quoted Talmud, let's keep on going. In Bavli, it would say Amar Mar. I'm saying that's the way it would work. No, because now we're making a quote. It says over there, again, and what did we learn before? What did the Gemara say before? Mar Rav Masnu B'Shem Shmuel says, that's what it is. And it really, I know it's late, but it's a little so let's look inside the Charedim. The Charedim brings in the Bavli just to appreciate more what we're talking about. All the way on the Charedim, 7 to 8 lines from the top. That Rav Masna b'Shem Shmuel Zuber HaTorah. Nusach HaBavli was that Shailu al Rav Masna. What was it? What's the pshat in Talmud? And they have a biyadi. So what did he do? No shame in that. You ask your Rebbe. Shailu al Rav Yehuda. Amar Lahu Hachi Amar Shmuel. And here the Charedim didn't have the Nusach Rizal. Okay, no one is perfect. Good. Not to make Shuki feel uncomfortable. It's very good. We love you. You're just as beloved to God. This Avos Yisrael. Maybe he said Avos Yisrael. It's to make the other people feel included, and we are inclusive. The Birchas Torah, the common Achi Shmuel Gufei, not Birchas HaTorah. No, he Bracha Avarabba, which is the second of Kriya Shema. And now, why did he say the words Birchas HaTorah? Why didn't you say you say Avos Olam? Hachi Karolei Birchas HaTorah. Hachi Mishum. Oh, here you go. Rav Mendel, the heat play Teres Nami L'Koyda BaTorah. Ukeda Amar L'Kaman, as we're going to have today on this Amid, and Ubabavli. That what? That Amar Shmuel, that Hishkim Lishnois Koydim Kriyas HaTorah. Sarach Levarich Birchas HaTorah. But if a person wakes up and they did not make Birchas HaTorah, but they read the Shema, meaning they read the Shema with the brachas. So la'achar kriya Shema ain't sarech levarach. Why? Ikvar niftra be'avar rabba upeidish Rashi. Why? Lefi shehi me'ein birchas HaTorah. Where do we have that? The same Yilbeino Lilmoid, right? I can maybe make a remes that if your nusach has avos olam, which is something that demands his boinanus, so you have to have bina. If you're going with avarabba, avarabba is a gift from God. A gift from God. You don't have to bina anything. Maybe that's why there's no bina here. Same Yilbeino. Lilmoid ulalame lishmalas is v'chulei. Oh, okay. So now, Yerushalmi Basa the Shamar Rav Mas B'Shem Shmuel Amr B'Shmoi B'Shiva Cheres. No, it's really the source is Rabbi Yehuda. The fact that we are quoting in the Yerushalmi B'Shem Shmuel, that's the way it works. Once he already knew the answer, so now we quote Rav Masna. That Rav Masna said B'Shem Shmuel Birchas HaTorah. Back in the Gemara. Now the first kasha is why would they omit Yoitzer HaMa'oros? So we'll get to in a moment. We read inside the Gemara in Bavli. That if you wake up in the morning and for whatever reason you did not make Birchas HaTorah, but you davened, which means you said Ava Soilam or Ava Rabba, whether you said the word Bina or not makes no difference. You followed your Nusach. That exempts you from Birchas HaTorah. But hold on, we're going to learn a few lines about this over here. It's not so simple. Well, now first kasha is back inside the Gemara of Haloy Lebercho Yotzei HaMa'oros. It's like, why not? So answers the Gemara of Shmuel Achoy. That Rav Berechia, not the one that we quoted before. I'll tell you why. Because Adayin lo yotzu hama'oros. Don't forget, guys, what did we also learn is that Anshe Mishmar, they would read it early. Or what this could have happened. It could have happened at a time that you don't have the Mishiyakir. Let's go with the Mishiyakir, your Chavir in Daladamas. What we learned over here in Yerushalmi in our edition on Daf Ches. So if they don't have enough light, if they're saying it that early, what this Tamar Yoitzer HaMa'oros is a pasna shegeitnish. And therefore, look inside the Mara Fulda. Look inside the Mara Fulda. All right, 12 lines from the top. Yoitzer HaMa'oros pitmiya. Can't say it. Ella bismano yoim ruzul levado. Now you get the flow. But 1 second, does it mean that they never said it? Says the Mara Fulda. They said it in the Beis Hamikdash. When? Later. I They're not saying it in the right order. Another thing you can infer, she'ein seder ma'akev. Number two, v'gam eino shaycha l'kriya shema. Wow. It is and it's not. The Mishnah says it is. Here it's not. Now we're stretching. That's the beauty of learning Gemara. Now let's keep on going. Ubeshabis, moisif and bracha achas l'mishmara yoytzei. Don't forget there would be an exchange of a guard before the musaf. Ma'u bracha. What would they say? Amarab chalmai zoyhi das idos. What is these words exactly like this? They would bench hashoichem abayis hazem yita beinechem. He should plant among you ahava, brotherhood, the ahava and love, shalom and peace, the reos and friendship. In other words, Kahanim are going to go ahead and they're going to give Birchas Kahanim. For them to channel God's blessings of peace to the people, there has to be peace amongst them. How do you do that? They have to have a brach. They also need a brach. That was the brach. Now let's go into this whole topic. Let's see how much we can go about does Abbas Oilam or Abarabba, is that a substitute for Birchas HaTorah? So Shmuel Amar Hishkim Lishnois. If you wake up to learn Torah, and by the way, even though that the model is Mebeis HaKnesses LeBeis HaMedrash, nowadays, for us to have epis, a semblance of a davening, it became a norm by all Yidden. You wake up first to learn. It's like a hachana to daven. So if you wake up to learn Chodim Kriya Shema, which is the way we do it, then you have to Tzarech Levarech. You have to make Birchas HaTorah. And what do we do nowadays? We make, let's call it 3 brachas. But if for whatever reason you get up, the first thing you did is you daven. You didn't even say what we do now, Birchas HaTorah. You didn't do that. You don't have to do Birchas HaTorah anymore. La'acher Kriya Shema, ein tzarech levarech. You don't have to read. You don't have to say it. Now, Omar Rebbe Ba. Let's qualify this ruling for who Sheshana Alasar. Don't ask how many things you have on this words. That only applies if you study Torah media. Now, hold on. What does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? Let me tell you what it doesn't mean. According to almost all of the commentators, it doesn't mean Shema is not called learning here. If not, what's the point of saying it? Why would someone say Birchas Ava Soilam? Because they're going to say the Shema. It means that the saying of the Shema is not a substitute for learning. So when he's adding that, when do we say that saying Ava Soilam is a substitution for Birchas HaTorah only Shoshana Alasar? It means that this person learned right after davening. That's what it means. After the end of davening. Whenever they finished, right afterwards they learn. That's very important. And there's another gears of the Rashba, and that is who shekara alasar, and that's different. The word shekara alasar means it's only valid if you read the Shema. Well, the Rashba was bothered with that because we know you make a bracha for a mitzvah, you have to do the mitzvah immediately afterwards. So it fits. What do we do nowadays? We make 3 brachas and we quote Chumash, Birchas Kohanim, Mishnah, and Braisa. That's what we do. So it bothered the Rashba this gear. So what do you mean? You're going to learn after Shemana Esrei, after davening, there's a hefsek. Doesn't work. So he taka was going is, when is Ava Soilam or Ava Rabba taka in the place of, if you read the Shema, that's different. That fits. And the Shema also has a component of learning. But without that gear set means you have to learn right after davening. Now, says the Gemara, Rab Chuna Amar, Zakt Rab Chuna, Nidin Advarim. Here, let's open up. We have a couple of minutes. What demands a Birchas HaTorah? Let me tell you right away what the Charedim says. He says, only Torah Shebechsav. However, Torah Shebechsav doesn't only mean the words of Scripture. It also includes Medrash. Medrash here from Rab Chuna does not mean what you call Medrash. Medrash does not refer to the homiletical part of the Torah. That's Gemara. That's Kabbalah. Right? Medrash means that there's a part of the oral Torah that takes a pasuk and translates, darshans the pasuk. Because many psukim, without the Torah Shabbat Pes translation, you don't know what it means. Like Tafas means 4. That's part of Torah Shabbat Sav. That's what he means. Torah Shabbat Sav, including the expounding of verses. For that, you have to have Birchas HaTorah. But if a person is only going to learn Torah Shabbat Peh, for them, dafanish. And I look inside the Charedim, 4 lines from the bottom. I just want to quote the Medrash means who karev lemikra. In other words, not mikra. Chumash needs a bracha, and also that which is close to the mikra, which is mechilta, safra, sefri, shehem, midrashe, mikraos, because it's teaching, it's expounding verses. Halachos, what's halachos? Not only halacha, Gemara, but Bavli, the Makim, halachos, it says Talmud. Talmud means the Torah Shabbat Peh. Talmud means Mishnah and Gemara. However, that's one opinion. Rab Simon b'Shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says bein medrash, bein halachis, tzarich levarich. Doesn't make a difference. Torah Shabbat Sav and Torah Shabbat Peh. And indeed, how do we follow? So Amar Rab Chia bar Ashi no hagin habeinon v'yosvim koimer Rav, that when we would learn in front of Rav, bein medrash, bein halachis, the poil mamish is zakininan lemivracha. He demanded for us to make a bracha. Now let me say like this. That if you remember when we learned this in brachas, what bracha is biblical? For sure, birchas hamazon. And there is a shita that says that birchas hatoyr is biblical. Where do we have that on Hazino? Right? Kishem Hashem ekra havu goydol alekeinu. Some people say that's a pasuk in Hazino that's demanding that Kishem Hashem ekra. When you're reading Chumash, havu goydol, that's the way that Chuna touched it. That's one of the reasons al pi nigla. Why do we make all of these brachas? And the biggest kasha is why, when a person is called to the Torah, are they making Asher Bachar Banu? They made it in the morning. So one answer is that since you have some shitas that hold that only the written Torah demands a bracha, when we make the brachas all 3 in the morning, we're making it for the entirety of Torah. So to emphasize that there is a special demand, according to some opinions, of making a bracha prior to Torah Shabbat Sav, we repeat the Asher Bachar Banu. And it's clear, al pi nigla. Look at the irony. The first bracha goes on Talmud. That's the lasoik or the al divrei Torah. The second bracha goes on Mishnah. And the third bracha, Asher Bachar Banu, goes on scripture, which is the bracha that we make before you read the Torah. The opposite of the normal order. The first bracha is al divrei Torah. It goes for Talmud or for the Braisa, outside of the Mishnah. The second bracha of Aharavna goes on the Mishnah. And then when we actually recite it, we go in the normal state. Then we say, like we said, Chumash. Chumash is Parshas Nasa, Birchas Kahana. Then we say the Mishnah and Pei. And then we say a Braisa. That Elul Dvarim is a Mishnah, and a Braisa is already the bridge between the Mishnah and the Gemara. This will prove Torah Shabbat Pes Chayiv Chaviv and Chamudim Divrei Torah. We had it a few daf ago, and the way Chassidus explains it, like the Seder, like why we're going out of the order, because first of all we're going both directions. When we're doing it, we're going it on the right Seder, Chumash, Mishnah, Braisa. But when we're making a bracha, that where is it the easiest for us to be toyam godliness when we understand? For us, when we're starting Molmata Lamaila, what's most understandable? The Gemara. What's one step above it? The Mishnah. Mishnah is already less seichel, it's more godliness, but for that we have to be a keli. And pure godliness is Torah Shabbat Sav, which we read and we understand nothing without the Torah Shabbat Peh. And let's leave it at that, and a lot more to be continued.